today we're going to be talking about unseen poetry. Now, unseen poetry is the one topic that lots of students find really scary. Stay calm. And that's understandable because every other text, your Jekyll and Hyde, your Shakespeare, your anthology poems, your teacher has been through it with you. So they've told you which quotes to look at, they've explained what the story is. And you always have that fear, what if I go into the unseen poetry exam and I just don't understand anything? But that's okay, because in this video, I'm going to teach you how to tackle an unseen poem and hopefully how to write a grade 9 essay on it. Today we're going to be looking at an example. It's an unseen poem called The Eagle by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And the question we're going to be looking at is, how is the eagle presented in this poem? Let's give it a read. He clasped the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls, he watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. Now, it is human nature to look at that poem, look at all the words that you don't know the meaning of, and panic and think, I don't know any of this. You're going to look at crag, you're going to look at azure, and you're going to start sweating and shaking, you're going to be nervous. And at that point, I want you to pause, I want you to take a deep breath, and I want my voice to come into your ear. Don't worry. Focus on what you do know. The examiner is never going to know about any lines or any words you didn't understand. You are going to pick the 3 quotations that you do understand. Hopefully they're going to be juicy quotations, and by juicy I mean hopefully they will have an interesting language device or some interesting words in there. And you're only going to write about them, and the rest of it no one will ever know. So if I look at this poem, I really like clasp the crag with crooked hands because it uses guttural alliteration. And if you don't know what that means, you need to go back to my language devices lesson. But I don't really know what crag means. Crag. What is a crag? Let's ask Siri. Define crag.
Crag means a steep or rugged cliff or rock face. Do you want to hear the remaining one?
No. So in my exam, I'm not going to write about it. Close to the sun. That's English. I know what close to the sun means, so I can start thinking, if the eagle is close to the sun, what does that tell us about him? Or if he believes he's close to the sun, what does that show us? So that's a good one. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. Personification. The wrinkled sea, the eagle thinks the sea is wrinkled and it's beneath him. Interesting, I might be able to say something about that. Like a thunderbolt. It's a simile. If I spot a simile in my exam, I am going to talk about it. So those are my 3 juicy quotations. What I do next is I need to analyze. So let's take close to the sun. I want you to take your paper, I want you to turn it landscape, and we're going to mind map our first quote. So write the quote close to the sun in the middle of your page. We're going to see all the interesting things we can say about it. To get a high mark, we want to say lots of things about the quote, not just one thing. So firstly, is the eagle literally close to the sun? Is he hovering around the sun? No, it's hyperbole, it's exaggeration. But it's not enough to just identify the device, we need to explain the effect. The writer's use of hyperbole shows. Pause the video now if you need to. Have a little think. If the eagle thinks he's close to the sun, what does that tell us about him? Let's go through some ideas. Well, firstly, if he's close to the sun, he's literally really high up. So that means he's at a vantage point. It means he can see everything below him. Why would that be good for an eagle? Well, if he's high up, he can see all of his prey. So this makes him seem like a predator, perhaps even quite dangerous. The next thing I'm going to say, close to the sun, but maybe because he's so high up, he feels like he's superior to everything around him. That makes him seem really arrogant, and a good word for that is narcissistic. It's a weird one to spell, narcissistic. It means like you love yourself. If I go back to that idea of him being able to see everything, that kind of makes him seem godlike, because God is all-seeing. It makes him seem omniscient. Perhaps the eagle is giving himself this elevated divine status. Okay, the sun is really powerful, right? The sun is like a powerful force. The fact that the eagle is aligning himself with such a powerful part of the universe shows his power. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to go close to the sun? I don't, because I would die. So the fact that he doesn't mind going close to the sun makes him seem really brave and daring. Perhaps he believes he's invincible. Remember, your marks lie in your analysis. I cannot say that enough times. So the more interesting things we can say about one quote, the higher the mark we will get. We want to give multiple interpretations. I always say your analysis should be in 3 layers. So you first think, what will all your class say about this quotation? Okay, so you say like the basic, obvious thing that all the class will say. Then in your paragraph, you're going to go on to what will only half the class think of? What will only half the class say? And then if you can go on to what can only you say about the quotation, that's where your grade 9 perceptive comes in, because it's like your interpretation that only you've thought of. It's very thoughtful, it's imaginative, it's original. I'm going to give you a grade 9 perceptive interpretation of this quotation. Because the eagle is described as being close to the sun, that reminds me of Icarus. Now, for those of you who don't know, Icarus is this guy from Greek mythology whose wings were made of wax, and everyone kept saying, don't go close to the sun, don't go close to the sun, because your wings will melt. But he thought, I'm not going to listen to anyone. He was arrogant. He thought he knew it all. So he went flying up to the sun, wings melted, and he died. So perhaps by having this reference of close to the sun, Tennyson is alluding, which means like reminding the reader of, he's alluding to the Greek myth of Icarus. And in this sense, maybe it's foreshadowing that the eagle's excessive pride is going to lead to his own downfall. So then, maybe this poem isn't even really about an eagle. Maybe it's an allegory. It has a wider message about human beings. It's teaching us that power is futile. You can think you're the most powerful person in the world, but your power is going to end. I'm gonna make it really clever now. If we're going with this idea that actually this poem is an allegory and it's actually about the abuse of power, about power being futile and pointless, maybe that's why Tennyson uses anthropomorphism throughout the poem. So he describes the eagle as a human being almost by talking about his hands and him standing and watching. And maybe all of that is done because Tennyson's actually using this poem as a warning to human beings.
Warning, warning.
That's good, isn't it? I really like that. I'm well impressed with that. So that is the hard bit done. We've got all of our analysis from this quote. All we need to do now is turn it into a paragraph. So we need to basically just put our mind map into full sentences. Let's give that a go together. If you like, you can even tick off points from the mind map as you go, just to make sure we haven't missed anything out. Firstly, in this poem, Tennyson presents the eagle as, so I'm writing a point that answers the question, as arrogant, I'm going to say. Quote, close to the sun. Identify language device. Here, the use of hyperbole shows how literally high up the eagle is. He is at a vantage point, which means he can see his prey clearly, establishing him as a dangerous predator. Also, by being so high up, it seems as though the eagle feels he is superior to everything around him, therefore making him seem arrogant. The eagle's high position also gives him a godlike status, as though he is omniscient. His narcissistic qualities are clear through the elevated position he gives himself, almost as if he believes he should be worshipped. The fact that the eagle aligns himself with such a powerful part of the universe, the sun, suggests he is powerful and daring and feels he is invincible. However, perhaps by using the reference of being close to the sun, Tennyson is alluding to the Greek myth of Icarus, and hence this could perhaps foreshadow, hint, that the eagle's excessive pride will lead to his own downfall. In this sense, this poem could be an allegory, where Tennyson uses the eagle as a vehicle to convey a wider message of the futility of power, further cemented through his use of anthropomorphism throughout the poem. I bet you when you first saw "Close to the Sun" as a quotation, you did not think we'd be able to produce something so brilliant from it. Now, here's the kind of plot twist. Even though that language analysis is grade 9, it's got all the different layers, analysing language isn't enough. We also need to analyse structure. But what does structure even mean? Well, just like we look for language devices, there are certain questions we should ask ourselves when we're looking at structure in poetry. Those questions are, is it a long or short poem? What could that symbolise? Is there a rhyme scheme? Is the rhyme scheme consistent, the same all the way through, or broken? Maybe it's written in rhyming couplets, A, B, A, B. What could that symbolise? Are the stanzas... A stanza is a paragraph in poetry, but in poetry we don't call it a paragraph. We call it a stanza because we have to show awareness of form. Are the stanzas the same length? Maybe this could show that something is really strict or controlled. Or are the stanzas varying in length? Maybe there is no fixed structure, which could symbolise chaos. Is there caesura? Caesura basically means any punctuation mark in one line of poetry. So in a single line of poetry, if there's a comma in the middle, if there's a question mark, a dash, any punctuation mark in a line is called caesura. And that could probably slow down the pace of the line. And then you've got to think what that might symbolise. Maybe time is passing slowly. Maybe the caesura creates a break in the line, which could show the person is breaking down emotionally. Do you know what I mean? Is there enjambment? Enjambment. I don't really know how to say it, but it's fine. Enjambment is when there is no punctuation mark at the end of a line. So, you know, like sometimes in poetry, you've got a sentence and then it just runs on to the next line instead of finishing the sentence on the same line. That's enjambment. So that actually does the opposite of caesura because it speeds up the pace of the poem. You're kind of going on to the next line, next line, next line. What could that symbolise? Maybe it shows the speaker's frustration. Maybe that also creates a break in the line which shows that the two people will never be together. You just got to link it to whatever your poem is about. Is there a cyclical structure? That means the beginning of the poem and the end of the poem have a link, like it starts with one line and it ends with the same line, or it starts in a happy tone and it ends on a happy tone. That's a cyclical structure. What could that symbolise? For this poem, for the eagle, I think the structure that we're going to talk about is really obvious, and that is that the poem is super short. Like, as soon as I looked at it, I was like, whoa, that's a really short poem. So that's what I'm going to talk about. What could that symbolise? It's a really short poem. Let's add our analysis of structure onto the end of our paragraph. This idea of the eagle being a microcosm for human beings who abuse and then inevitably lose their power is further reinforced structurally, as the poem is very short, which could symbolise how temporary the eagle's power was. Done. That wasn't too hard, was it? I picked my structure point, it's a short poem. I analysed what it shows, that his power didn't last very long, and I just chucked it on the end of my paragraph. There we go. That's it. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope Unseen Poetry feels a little bit less scary now. If you found this video useful, give it a like, and don't forget to watch the rest of the videos in this series, because they're really good, and you're going to be poetry pros by the end of it. That's bilabial plosive alliteration.
Take two.
And do a mind map on our first quotation. Further cemented through his use of anthropomorphism throughout the poem. Don't worry. No, that's not really my voice, really.
This is your conscience speaking.
Don't worry. This is going to not look very cool. You're not making very cool.
That's all right.